Well, someone's going to take a lot of losses, and it's all going to spill over, and it's going to affect every last one of us because we have 11 trillion. Imagine $11 trillion of commercial real estate at risk. And let's say it takes a 25% hit. Well, who's going to pay for this? How can our banks afford to pay 25% loss on $11 trillion? Let me go to my very first slide and let's just talk about that. So, yes, we have $11 trillion in real estate at risk, and we're talking about at risk right now. And someone is going to take some very, very steep losses on us. And of course, we're talking about liquidity being removed from the marketplace. Now we're talking about real assets. These are things that destabilize banks. They lose their, not only lose their reserves, but they lose their liquidity. All of it's going to go. So let's go to this first one. Now, listen, I just got this from Costar and Zerohedge. They're estimating that we have over 1 billion square feet of vacant office space right now. 1 billion square feet of empty office space that no one's paying for. No one's using. How can you afford, if you're a small time, just look at our portfolio. If we had like 10 houses and 20, and 20% of them or 30% of them aren't generating any income, this is a terrible thing for us. We can't survive something like that. So let's just take this to the point where we have 1 billion square feet. And further in this report, CoStar is saying that we got between 5 and 10 towers, office towers in these downtown areas across the United States that are at risk of a default every single month. So in 12 months, you could have 60 to 120 towers defaulting. And of course, when they default, that goes back to the lender. And you know where these are at? We've been talking about this for months and months and months. We've got 5 to 10 office towers that are at risk each and every month in Chicago. They're in San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Philadelphia. Washington, D.C. is terrible for its occupancy. And someone's paying the freight. And you know what happens to these cities that are having people that their population is leaving anyway? And now when you don't have any occupancy and vacancy in the downtown areas, well, all the transportation. So you got subways and bus lines and parking and taxis and Ubers and gas stations that are used to handling all this commuters going back and forth. Well, they go away. So all that revenue that they bring in just for the transportation goes away. They don't buy any breakfast. They don't buy any coffee. They don't buy any they don't buy any lunch. They don't go to the bars afterwards. They don't go shopping for flowers to take home to their spouse. They don't go out and get dresses and shirts and things on lunch from the retail stores. None of this happens in these areas that are dependent on this huge portion of population coming to the downtown area. Well, it's gone. And it's being replaced by crime, by drugs. The bathrooms are full of empty needles. There's clients and buyers and staff are concerned about being assaulted on their way in because the cities are becoming vacant and they are at risk of becoming fallen cities. So we've talked about Los Angeles. It's one of the endangered cities. They have an iconic building there. That's the 30-story bank building, a U.S. bank tower. There is so much vacancy in Los Angeles to fill 30 U.S. bank towers. 30 20-story bank towers. They're not alone, of course. Manhattan has the Empire State Building. That's their iconic one. They have enough vacancy in Manhattan. And of course, it's growing. It's growing. It's getting worse absolutely every single day. Every time a tenant, their lease comes up, they have to do the numbers and see if this is even something that they want to stay. So right now they have 26 vacant Empire State Buildings. That's 76 million square feet of office space. We've talked about this before. $725 million default by the Park Hotels and Resorts in San Francisco. Now, let's just talk about what happens when they default. So they probably put a minimum of 25% down. So they probably had it was probably $100 million or $1 billion purchase. They put $250 million down, and they had $750 million. They probably paid $25 million in principal down, so they owe $725 million on these properties. And the properties obviously are not worth $750 million or $725 million, and they're defaulting. Because what happens as these prices of these properties comes down because they're no longer as valuable, remember they're sold on income. If they're not getting income, well, the value drops. So if they were worth $1 billion and now they're only worth $700 million, they have to put 25%. So they have 75% or better loan to value, depending on who you are. Maybe it's only 70 or 60% loan to value. So you have to come in with that down payment to get down to the loan to value ratio that you're looking at. And of course, if you've already lost 250, you're probably not in the mood to lose another $250 million. So they give it to the bank. Well, the bank doesn't want it. It's not good for the bank. The bank's not in the business of holding hotels and office buildings. And of course, they get them, and now they've got to maintain them. These buildings, these are very expensive. They got elevators, and the structures have to be taken care of and maintained. Costs them millions of dollars a year to maintain these buildings. So now they've got an asset that they've lost money on. Now they get an office, they get an asset that's in, they get an office building, they're not in that business. And this is how you get built. This is how you get banks that get destabilized. Now, if you have 10 or 15 defaults in your portfolio as a bank, this is a very bad thing. You could go out of business as a bank. If banks start going out of business, they lose their portfolio. Someone's got to come in and rescue them. So it's probably going to be the U.S. government. But what if you're a stockholder in it, or if you've got holdings in these banks, they're going to be at risk. And of course, if the banks are taking defaults, they're not going to be lending money. And if they're not lending money, what happens to the economy? These regional banks are the ones that put up most of the funds for new construction. And if you want to have a local project, they're the ones that people go to. Well, they're most at risk now. We've already seen what happened to Silicon Valley National Bank and Republic Bank and Signature Bank. These guys took enormous losses, and it looks like the losses are going to get worse. I think we're going to have a lot of names on the new banks that are coming down. So this isn't good for San Francisco. These two hotels that were in the Park Hotels chain. One was a 1,920 room Hilton hotel, and the other was over 1,000 Park 55 hotels. So 9% of the hotel stock. But a lot of these conventions are not going to San Francisco. Who's going to go to San Francisco when they have homelessness and drug problems and crime? When the hotels, you go to the bathroom, there's all kinds of needles in the bathrooms. Who wants to do that? That's just going to drive good business out. It's going to be a problem. Someone's going to pay for this. PIMCO, we've talked about this before. They just defaulted on $1.7 billion worth of properties. It was 7 towers. This was just happened 2-3 months ago. And of course, now the value is probably no longer $1.7 billion. So they gave it to the bank at $1.7 billion. Now it's probably even less. So the bank is looking at pretty steep losses. Again, it's the bank. This is part of our financial system, and it's at risk for all of us. We are all going to pay for this. So we are all at risk. This is just the tip of the iceberg that's coming in. Now, here's the real crux of this, is the fact that we are going to be looking at commercial real estate debt that's going to be coming to maturity, $2.5 trillion. Now, I think in the next 6 to 8 months, we have $500 billion, almost $500 billion coming due. And of course, this is going to be coming due at much, much higher interest rates. So not only is their payments going to go up, but we now probably have a valuation problem where in order for them to refinance their debt, they're probably going to have to bring in enormous amounts of cash. And a lot of these guys won't or can't do that. So a lot of insurance companies are going to start taking these properties back, and it's going to could possibly destabilize them. Commercial-backed mortgage-backed securities are going to be going out, and banks. It's a very difficult situation. And we're seeing distressed debt is coming to multi-year highs. I think we'll probably go to record highs because we've had some very, very liberal, easy money in the last 3-4 years. And it's just, we have a lot of bad debt out there. You just have to know, a lot of it. And we've had this huge bubble. So we'll probably become historically bad debt coming. So this is going to be one for the record books, I'm pretty sure. And you can just see this. So you can just see this in the commercial back securities delinquency rate is just dropping. I got this from Zerohedge and Wolf Street. Again, it's generally a lagging indicator. In this, it's probably a leading indicator. So in the great financial crisis, the defaults were actually lagging, and they were peaked at the very bottom of the marketplace. And here they're starting to lead. I think they're going to get very, very bad, and I think we're probably just entering it now. And I just got this too, and this is the crux of what's going on. So you just have to put your thinking cap on and just think of this. So here in Westlake and Houston's energy corridor, a 420,000 square foot Class A office tower. Now this is just classic of what we're talking about. Now in 2014, when they refinanced this property, it was worth $121.1 million. That's what the appraisers came out and did this. You know, these would be MAI appraisers, Master Appraisal Institute appraisers looking at this. You know, they do a very, very thorough job. 121. Now it just sold. It just sold for $20.6 million. Now, it was appraised at 121, so someone lost $100 million just in the value. But it gets worse than that. So in order to have the bank, because the bank had this, in order for the bank to sell it, they had to give concessions of $11.2 million, probably a lot of deferred maintenance on these things, because, you know, the elevators that need constant repair, we got windows and interiors, the place just needs to be maintained, painting it, landscape, all kinds of things need to be maintained. 11.2 million of that 20 million they had to give us concessions, so they ended up getting a $9.2 million. So it went from they lost 83.3% loss. Now I'm laughing. How in the world can you do this? I mean, how can you lose 83.3% of a loan and expect to stay in business? You don't have to lose too many of these before we've got some serious losses here. Now that's office space that we've been talking about. What is going to happen with retail space? So let's just take a quick peek, because these are all at bankruptcy risk. And, you know, these are retail stores, you know, and I don't have everyone in here. We've got Bed Bath and Beyond. They've been hanging on for a long time. Best Buy is in the news. Nordstrom's, Express, David's Bridal has certainly been is in bankruptcy now. I mean, that's an icon for a lot of brides. Kohl's is in trouble. Dollar Store, and CVS Pharmacy is having trouble, along with Foot Locker. These guys are in the huge retail space. So what about all the malls and retail spaces that are using these as tenants? Well, I think we're here in phase 3. It certainly looks like we're in phase 3. I've often wondered how we're going to get to phase 3. Because a year ago, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it a year ago. I could see it on my timing model that we're running into trouble, but I couldn't see it on the real estate cycle. And both of them were not in sync yet. They're in sync now. So let me just run this through this. Phase 4 is easiest for you to start to realize what phase 4 is, because that's the pits. That's where it's just the bottom of real estate. This is when you start saying, I am never going to buy another piece of real estate in my life because I've taken such losses on this. You know, I've got so much stress. I'm never ever going to do that. This would have been like 2008 through 2012, where people were just losing their shirts. And that was actually going into the recovery phase. So recovery phase is from 2011, 12 through 2014, 15, 16. Still had some trouble in 2015 and 2016. We were still working off some of the inventory even then. And they go into phase 2, and phase 2 is a pretty good time. That's from late 2015 to 2019, which is what, if you look at our videos, we said there's going to be a correction then. And then we were off to the races, and we went into 2020. And that went into our accumulation phase and our explosive phase. And I said we're coming to the end of the cycle, but I could not see where we were getting hyper supply. Well, now I can, because the builders, of course, I've talked about the builders being a possibility. You know, builders built thousands of homes, thousands. They had a list of buyers long, like months and months long. what they couldn't complete. They kept running into, they couldn't get sliding doors, they couldn't get glass, they couldn't get tile, they couldn't get shingles, they had trouble getting labor. And it's went from like being a 4 to 5 month completion to a 15 to 16 to 18 month completion. And now they're starting to get completed and buyers can't afford it. So all this time, these buyers are waiting, and the real estate interest rates have doubled, and a lot of the buyers can't buy. And so they're getting these back as specs, and they get thousands and thousands. This is why you're seeing the builders are selling like crazy. They say, oh, there's a lot. They're in the news. Oh, yeah, the builders are selling all kinds of houses. Well, I'm going to tell you that builders are terrified, just terrified that they're going to have these buildings around. They didn't build them spec, and they're doing whatever it takes to get rid of them. They're doing concessions. They're giving away, reducing interest rates. They're giving away appliances and special cabinets. They'll do whatever it takes, raising interest, raising commissions, whatever it takes to get their buildings sold. And they still have thousands of them. They're just wanting to get rid of these properties. But here's where I think the oversupply comes from: office, retail. Obviously, we're talking about that in the commercial space. That is just an obvious. But what's not so obvious is the Airbnb and the VRBOs, because I'm going to go to my next slide here. They are just piling up on the marketplace. And I think this is just a huge overhang that's going to be coming out soon. Because I got this from ReVenture. And according to ReVenture, and this kind of goes along with our research, there's way more VRBOs than there are homes for sale. So going all across the nation, we've had a kind of a shortage of listings, and we're at 550,000 homes for sale. But there's 936,000 VRBOs and Airbnbs and vacation rentals available. Almost double. And I think they're probably oversaturated. Let me go to my next slide. We'll just talk about that, because the valuations are dropping. Again, this is from ReVenture. You can see here in Phoenix, Arizona, where we're in Scottsdale, the revenues for these has dropped dramatically, 48%. They're not alone. I mean, this is what's happening, is that a lot of these VRBOs had these enormous prescriptions for success. They're going to do, $10, $20, $30, $40,000 a month in revenue. And of course, they've got nowhere near that much. And even here in Phoenix, Arizona, where we had Super Bowl, the word on the street is that over half of the VRBOs did not get leased during Super Bowl. And there are, of course, a lot of people put some pretty expensive numbers on their properties with their expectations. And a lot of these people paid a lot of money for properties. If you bought them in 21 and 2022, you paid a lot of money for your rental, and they're probably not profitable for you. And they've lost, their revenues are down, I'm going to guess 35 to 50% across the country. Well, that's an astounding amount of numbers. So just look for a lot of these to come back. So I've used this slide before. Charles Hugh Smith, he's always talking about retracement of the cycles. This is this is peak number 1, and this is really peak number 2 right here. That's just textbook for these things, and that's what I think is happening now. Let me go to my slide here. This is stylized of it, because you don't see all the squiggles in this, but I think we're really close to the top. I think we're topping out. I think we're in that process right now. I think that peak 1 came in March or April of 2022. And we are forming peak 2 now. And once that is over with, I think that we are going to complete. I think we're going to be done. And then I think we have a possibility of 30 to 65% retracement. Now, in the better markets of Florida, Texas, and Arizona, probably won't suffer anywhere near as much as some of the endangered cities. This is why I'm pleading with people to start thinking about that, because the path you choose is going to make a huge difference in your life. This is at a seminal point right now. So if you choose wrong, I think you could certainly pay for that and be very, very sorry that you've done that. So this is where I'm at. You are welcome to reach me. We are here to help. If I can talk to your wife or your spouse or financial planner, we're going to have to talk to your brokers and your accountants. Try and make a plan. I've been talking about the fact that you can utilize a 1031 exchange and not have a capital gains event. I know a lot of people are reluctant over the last, if they own a building for 10 years, you've had some very, very good gains on it. Maybe you've got $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, you don't want to pay tax on. You don't have to with the 1031 exchange. We just defer that tax. And it's easy peasy. I mean, it's an easy thing to do, and get into a better market. So if you're in an endangered market, get into a better market. It makes perfect good business to do that. I mean, you can go to Florida, Texas, and Arizona. I mean, here in Arizona, we've got businesses for decades. We've got so much construction and new jobs and growth here. It's just phenomenal. So if I can help in any way, I certainly will. My very, very best to you. Bye-bye.